Hey guys, welcome to the Primed Fatherhood podcast. This is episode 23, and I'm your host, Tyler Condi. When I started the Primed Fatherhood podcast, in that first episode, I talked a little bit about what my goals were for the podcast and why I felt compelled to try to help dads. But what I didn't get to talk about very much was the actual story of how it all came together and why I felt that way. And in reality, it came together because we were preparing for our second child and I was feeling underprepared, and so I went back to my notes and research and all the stuff that I had done to prepare for our first daughter, and I realized that there was 6 main pillars of fatherhood, and as I studied those and looked at them, I realized that these 6 main areas, if you do well there, you'll feel more prepared, you'll be more effective, and you'll be more satisfied as a dad. We have answered the call. We are committed to a greater purpose.
We are fathers. Past achievements do not guarantee future success. We will prime ourselves often to navigate each new challenge.
We are capable, brave, and relentless.
We will remain undaunted.
So the story of how Primed Fatherhood came together really starts with just my mentality of how I do things. When I started my first business, I jumped in with both feet and I just hit the ground running and went for it. But at that same time, I knew I was underprepared and I knew that I had to learn more and become more in order to make it a success. So as I was running, I was constantly trying to learn. I was listening to and reading 4 to 8 books a month. I was going to as many events as I could. I was taking notes on how things were working and what wasn't working. I was trying to document everything, and it just became this crazy experience where I became 10 times the student then than I ever was in college or high school or anything. And when I learned that I was going to be a dad, I kind of took that same approach to this new challenge of being a dad, where I just started to read everything I could. I started to talk about it constantly with people. I was taking notes. I was journaling. I was trying to make sense of it all and prepare myself because I was feeling really underprepared. And for me, the role of fatherhood has always been so huge and honorable and exciting and scary that for a long time I put off wanting to be a dad because I felt like it was too much and like I wasn't ready, and I had the business as an excuse to not do it. But when it finally happened, I knew there was no turning back. And so I went for it. I started to do all of this research. I started to talk to my dad and my father-in-law and my grandpas, and who are all awesome examples in their own ways. And I just started to compile all this information. And the more information that I compiled, the better that I felt about it. It wasn't super organized, but it was organized enough for me to remember what to do during labor and delivery, or how to help a newborn, or just anything about being a dad. I was consuming like crazy, and it came from TED Talks and from 5 or 6 books and from I think there was almost 10 podcasts that I was listening to about being a dad or preparing to be a dad. Church, I got a ton of information from church, and then I just started to observe dads more and more, and the more that I researched it, the more excited I got for it. And that was also a big time of transformation for me in a lot of other ways, and I talk about that in the first episode of this podcast. But I had all of these notes and things compiled, and then when we had our daughter, I just went for it. And I referred back to him a little bit, but in a lot of ways, all of that information that I pulled in was just to help me to feel prepared. It wasn't something that I necessarily used when I was in the moment, but it did definitely help. Then as my timeline goes on, I started to get more burned out with the business. I took a new job and left my own business that I had been full-time on for 5 years. And that was kind of a crazy thing, but I did it because I wanted to be a better, more engaged dad. And it allowed me to work less hours and to provide better for my family. And then all of a sudden, a year ago now, I found myself thinking about becoming a dad again, thinking about having another kid. And pretty soon we were pregnant. And then all of a sudden we found ourselves in this crazy pandemic. And again, I was feeling scared and underprepared and feeling like I needed to level up. And so I went back to all my notes, all those awesome resources that I had found, all those podcasts and books and everything. And I went through it all. And it was really cool to see how much stuff I had found then and to start adding to it. But as I went through all of the information the second time, I realized, like, wow, I have a lot of info and a lot of things that have really helped me. And even just seeing them for the second time, the same exact things, it really helped me to feel more prepared and feel better about having another kid and having to be a little spread thin a little more than what having one kid does. And so then I started to kind of question, like, I've got all of this information compiled. I wonder if someone else needs it. And I looked around to see if anyone else had compiled the amount of information that I had. And as I looked around for resources about fatherhood, I realized that there was a lot more content about the issues of fatherlessness. And there was a lot of disjointed information, but nothing really organized and helpful. And so then I started to feel a little more compelled to share all the stuff that I had pulled together. And at that same time was when I found, I think it was like fathers.com. They had this article called The Extent of Fatherlessness. And it said more than 20 million children live in a home without the physical presence of a father. Millions more have dads who are physically present but emotionally absent. If it were classified as a disease, fatherlessness would be an epidemic worthy of attention as any national emergency. And when I realized that, and when I was thinking about the COVID-19 pandemic and that I realized this fatherlessness thing really is so many more people drastically affected than even what we're dealing with now. I was like, wow, this really is an important subject. And so after seeing all of these pleas for help on websites like that and in church and just seeing our friends and family who have dealt with not having either an engaged dad or a present dad at all, then I started to feel very compelled to share all of the research and my experience with people. So I started to dig deeper, and I actually created a survey that I just gave to all of my friends and family on Facebook at first. And then seeing their results, it was a survey about fatherhood, but seeing their results prompted me to actually pay for some Facebook ads to get some other people to take the survey. And I was surprised because of the 900 people who I sent this to, I got 300 responses. And anyone who does email marketing or any online marketing knows that that is a huge response rate. And so it got me excited. But that's in that survey, I just asked questions like, what tools do you use as a father? What are your concerns as a father? How have you changed since you've become a father? And who do you look up to for fatherhood? And I got a real variety of answers to those questions, and it really spurred me on to keep digging, because there was some people who talked about all of the positives of becoming a dad, and then there was others who you could tell were struggling, and they were talking about how, like they had become so much more stressed and had more struggles with anger that they had never dealt with, and that they had gained huge amounts of weight, or they had, been overly challenged. And so I felt like there was a ton of good information there, and between what I got in the survey and all of the research and writing that I had done and the organizing and the thinking, I started to pull it all together and look for recurring elements and themes. And what I was really looking for was like, what are the things that a dad really has to be good at in order to be a great dad? And I started to see the really obvious ones, like you have to provide for your family. That's one that you always hear. The same as you need to protect the family. Those are age-old fatherly responsibilities in a really traditional sense, and I still believe that they're true. I see that in the gospel of Jesus Christ over and over in the Bible and everything, that it's written there that that's part of the role of being a dad. Another one that I saw in all of this study and all of this information I was gathering was fathers need to be good teachers. They have to teach their children and even their wives and themselves what is right. And so those three were pretty obvious, like really important but distinct areas of fatherhood: provide, protect, teach. So then when I started to go through my notes, I could see that there was a real need for dads to just be present. There were so many complaints of dads doing the basics, like protecting and providing, and maybe even teaching, but leaving holes in their children's and their wives' lives because they were distracted or they were stuck going through the motions. And this is something that I've heard about from tons of people, and it's something that I found myself fall into, where I just come home from a hard day at work and I'm just completely smoked, and I'll be there, but I won't be saying much or doing much and not really contributing. And the amount of time that a working dad has to spend with their kids is like 2 or 3 hours a day at max. And so I realized that that's a really critical part of the dad equation. And that theme kept coming up in all of the leadership training and reading that I do for business and just for fun. Actually, I'm kind of a leadership learning nut, and I see that constantly in those trainings and in my experience as a leader, in the sense that the best leaders are the ones who are really engaged. They're really supportive of their team. They jump in and help either from the front line or from the middle of the ranks or from behind. It doesn't matter where they're leading from. They're just there and they're in it. And people with a leadership style like that always garner more trust and more productivity out of the people that they're leading than the ones who lead from a distance, or the ones who just don't engage and build relationships and grow. And so that area was kind of the fourth distinct area that I was seeing was really critical for dads to get good in. And then there was one more that stuck out to me because it was a big mistake that I had already been making. Before I became a dad and while I became a dad, I had been struggling to manage my time and my money. And I've seen and felt firsthand how I've hurt my family by not acknowledging that I was supposed to be a steward over our most precious resources. And so being a good manager, specifically a good manager of your time and your money, helps you to be a great dad. And I found tons of articles and things to support that, but I was really feeling the sting of not doing that one well. And I'm still paying for it in reality. And so by that time, I had these 5 major areas of focus that made the greatest impact: protect, provide, teach, be present, and then manage your time and resources. I was thinking, okay, this is a pretty solid list, and kind of researching it and trying to challenge it and see, if those were distinct areas or if they overlapped and how it worked. And as I was thinking about this over the course of a month or two, I started to think about all of these situations that I had heard about in 2020 of how there was these, I think, 7 different guys who I knew and looked up to, and how their lives were all kind of falling apart before my eyes. And it wasn't due to the pandemic. It was all something different. Some of them I'm pretty close to, and others I wasn't as close to, but I definitely was privy to what was going on. And I realized that there was a common thread tying all of these tragedies together. And all of these guys started to lose the hustle and the humility and the healthy fear that had made them successful in the first place. And what I really identified was they had just kind of stopped working on themselves and working on worthy goals, and got their hands caught in some sort of trap. And what I realized was it came from both ends of this spectrum. One end was like extreme comfort, and the other end was extreme discomfort. If they were, all of those guys that I saw were on one end of this spectrum, and I saw them getting stuck and completely trapped and having their lives be torn apart. And it didn't matter whether the trap was anger, adultery, abuse, an obsession with work, gambling, pornography, alcohol, or drugs, or even just letting their physical health go. It seemed like when they got into that extreme on the spectrum of comfort and discomfort, they lost sight of keeping control of themselves, bridling their passions, and staying disciplined and staying on a healthy path. And it seems like we all have some sort of vice that we will default to if we either get too comfortable or too strained. And I experienced it in my life. When I was extremely strained in 2017, like I talked about in the first episode of this podcast, I did have that default, and it took me straight down an addictive path, and I struggled there, and it took me pulling myself out of that and working on myself, trying to really discipline myself and refine myself to pull out of that. And so that was what I realized, was life is like running up an escalator that's going down. we have to be constantly working to better ourselves and to keep ourselves focused in the right direction. Because in order to get to the top of that escalator, it takes focus, some real exertion, and a little bit of luck. And if you let things slide even a little bit, you lose precious ground instantly. That escalator that's going down will take you down as soon as you stop running. And so with my experience of really screwing things up and then pairing that with seeing all these other guys who were struggling, it really made me realize that there was a sixth component to being a great dad. And that component is you have to focus on refining yourself and bridling your passions, staying disciplined and keeping yourself on a healthy path to really fulfill the duties of fatherhood throughout your life, because fatherhood is a lifelong role and commitment. So as I had this list of these 6 distinct areas that dads need to be great in, I started to talk to all the dads that I really respected about it, to my father-in-law, to my dad, to guys that I work with and friends and people from church. And the more I talked about it, the more I would try to pose questions to poke holes in the ideas and to see if, there's other things that are more important. And I really kind of settled on those 6 elements as distinct areas that we need to work in order to be great dads. And as I was thinking about them and looking at them, I ended up making some crazy sticky note mosaics on the wall, seeing what correlated and what individual parts of being a dad fit under which pillar that I was looking at. And that was when I realized that these 6 different elements could be made into an acronym. And that was when I came up with PRIMED. And PRIMED stands for provide, refine, instruct, manage, engage, and defend. And so those are those 6 areas with slightly different words, but primed in and of itself made sense too, because what I've realized from my own personal failings and from seeing my friends and these other guys that I've seen have these times where they've crashed and burned, is that it doesn't matter how good you are yesterday. You have to be focused in order to have things turn out today and tomorrow. And if you lose your focus on what's most important, you will struggle. And you hear that a ton in the stock market and in the finance world. Past achievements do not guarantee future successes. And it's true for dads. And so having primed as the acronym really helped me to put it all together, because when you're priming something, you're preparing it to work properly. If you're priming a water well, you're putting a little bit of water in that seal so that it can pump to its fullest capacity. Or when you're priming a wall to be painted, you're preparing it for its final coats. You're preparing it to execute its final duty. And so that was even more fitting to think that these 6 elements, provide, refine, instruct, manage, engage, defend, made an acronym that tells you that you've got to focus and work every day to be a great dad, rather than just get in it and expect things to turn out based on how good things have gone for you in the past. And so this was a really cool epiphany that I had when it all kind of came together like this. And I know that these 6 areas don't cover every single aspect of being a dad, and it's not perfect, and I'll never claim that I could research my way into writing a manual that would take you directly to dad greatness or something like that. But I do wholeheartedly believe that putting consistent effort into each of these 6 areas will help anyone to be a more prepared, effective, and satisfied father. And when I think of all of this time that I've spent in research and organization and writing and thinking, and I pair that with the struggles that I see in a fatherless or a weakly fathered world, I feel so compelled to do whatever I can to help dads to be and feel prepared to take on this critical role of fatherhood and press on through this role to the end. And I don't think that any of these 6 areas are a revelation to anyone. And I believe that everyone who wants to do a good job as a dad will be aware of these areas. But I've seen that the challenge is keeping all of these areas in mind long enough to actually make some progress on them. With all of the roles that we have as dads, sometimes it seems like we are the spinning plate act in the circus. And there are so many things demanding our time and attention that it's all we can do to go from one plate to the next, just giving them a spin or a correction and balance. I feel like the best contribution that I can make to dads is to just stand next to them and cheer them on and let them know when a plate is about to fall. Each of these 6 different areas are plates that we need to keep spinning. And my goal is to just keep hitting on them a little bit at a time in order to help us to all stay focused and to keep making a little bit of progress in each area. There's a lot of myths about fatherhood that I think need to be broken, and one is that fatherhood is futile, that it's an endeavor that doesn't matter in the end or doesn't help, and the statistics couldn't tell us that that's further and the statistics tell us that that couldn't be further from the truth. Fatherlessness was the single biggest concern of Americans in the 2010 census, and the areas where there's more fatherlessness are the highest crime rate areas, the highest teen pregnancies, and all of those things that contribute to the breakdown of society really come from a lack of fathers. So my goal is to help to break down myths like that, but then also on the opposite end of the spectrum, I think that people feel like fatherhood is so important that you have to be perfect to do it, and that if you can't be perfect or you don't want to be perfect, that you shouldn't become a father. And I don't think that that is realistic or true at all either. But what I do know is if you're a dad or you want to be a dad, you just need to put in consistent effort and give it your best effort, and everyone around you will see that. You will see yourself progressing, you'll do better, and your kids will be fine, your family will be good. That's really the goal of primed fatherhood is to help weak men become strong and to help strong men stay strong as fathers. And so I'm not ever going to claim to have all the answers to fatherhood challenges that we run into, but I am promising that I will help you to keep these 6 pillars of fatherhood at the forefront of your mind, so when you are confronted with challenges, you will be prepared in each of these distinct areas of responsibility. In the Primed Fatherhood podcast, I like to do a mix of interviews and shorter, more focused episodes that I've started calling primer episodes. And I try to alternate in between interviews and primers to give variety. But the goal is always for me to either inspire and motivate dads or to help to outfit them with the tools and knowledge needed to find success in each of the 6 areas that I've discussed today. Provide, refine, instruct, manage, engage, and defend. So in the next 6 primer episodes that I put out, I'll go into more detail of some of the research and the responsibilities that are in those six distinct areas. I hope that this little story helped you. I hope that this helped you to realize how things are coming together for Primed and what my goals are. But really, I just want you to think about today, which of those 6 areas am I doing well in, and which of those 6 areas do I need to put more attention to? Am I doing good as a provider? Am I refining myself? Am I instructing my children enough? Am I managing my time and my money? Am I engaged daily? Am I really committed to helping with these things? Am I leading the family? And then, am I defending the family from everything that threatens it? So just ask yourself, how am I doing in each of those areas? And then stay tuned for the next 6 primer episodes as I go through those areas in more depth. We've got some cool interviews coming up as well. And so for now, please subscribe to the podcast, leave us a rating if you can, and share it. And if you want to engage with more like-minded fathers, please join the Primed Fatherhood Facebook group. And as always, remember to keep coming back here to stay primed.